What's going on, everybody? It is your boy Zamboni. I am an astrologer and musician, and it is time to talk about the astrology of the week ahead. As always, I thank you so very much for being here. Thank you for being a part of this community. Thank you for checking me out on Patreon, where you can get an electional report, where you can help to time your life. There's an Astro Basics course if you've been watching YouTube astrologers and all that, and you want to get a better understanding of what's going on. You can check that out there. If you want to send me a tip via Venmo, Cash App, PayPal, super helpful. If you want to go to YouTube, Spotify, Pandora, Tidal, wherever you like to get your music, and check out Zamboni Funk there, that would be super appreciated. There's podcasts and stuff like this. If you like what I do here and you do 10 minutes, where I do 10 minutes and you would like me to talk about your chart for 10 minutes in the same video format, you can go to zambonifunk.com/store and get that there. Thank you all so much for being here. Let's talk about the astrology of the week ahead. So this week we finally get to see Mars direct. I've been talking about Mars retrograde for so long. I'm so tired of talking about Mars retrograde in Gemini. I'm so tired of that phrase, Mars retrograde in Gemini. We're about to have Mars stationing direct in Gemini. Now, of course, this doesn't mean that we're like done dealing with the things that Mars retrograde in Gemini has been talking about. Of course not. We have to go back through all the same stuff that we've been doing. So back in, I think it was like late August, Mars entered Gemini and then moved through Gemini, made it all the way almost to the end, stationed retrograde at the very end of Gemini, I think at 28 degrees of Gemini, and then started to move backwards and moved back through all of basically the whole space of Gemini, is now going to station direct at 8 degrees of Gemini, and is now going to move back forward and try to do all the stuff again. So whenever we see that kind of shape, then, and there's like, if you look in the sky, like, if you look not only at the longitude, which is when I say 28 degrees of Gemini, I'm talking about the longitude. If you also look at the latitude, then what you'll notice throughout that process is that Mars and any retrograde planet will do a loop-de-loop, right? And so whenever we see this kind of shape, right, the loop-de-loop shape, then what we're gonna see is like having to turn around and look back at things and see what's going on another time. In Gemini, we've been talking about reevaluating the action plan or something like this, right? And so we're still, this week we are even still in the throes of the retrospective situation that it's not even the new year yet. And I would expect this to continue because Gemini is ruled by Mercury. And what's going on with Mercury right now? Well, Mercury is retrograde in Capricorn. So, and we'll see that station next week. And then we're going to do the same thing with Mercury. We're going to get that little loop-de-loop, and then we're going to go forward again. And so, so we're not into new territory by any means yet. Now is the moment where we start to be like, okay, can we move forward from here? And if so, then how are we going to do it, right? I've been recommending the journal for many weeks and trying to get, I myself have been very antsy. I've been very just like anxious to get it started, get moving and stuff like this. I have this like new music that I've been so excited about. I really want to get it out there, but then there's been technical bullshit. There's been stuff with the cover artist. I couldn't get it out on time, and then we cut, there's been trouble with the mixing engineer, and there's been trouble, there's just been at every step of the process there's been stuff in the way. And what that has demonstrated to me is that although I may be excited to start moving, I am not yet ready to start moving forward yet, right? So we're still in this moment where it's like time to get into that journal to really look and see what's going on here, what has been happening. And then, so we're getting past the true retrospection, we're not yet because we still got Mercury retrograde and whatever, but it's like, we're coming to a point with Mars starting to move forward that it starts to be like, okay, well, so what? if this has been what's going on for so long, and if I've been, like diligently looking back in my life over, whatever cyclical period of time, 2018, 2008, whatever, looking through the whole thing and being like, well, how has this been going for me, and how do I really feel about it, and all this kind of stuff. Then now with the station moving forward, it's like we've gathered all this information, and so how are we going to integrate it? How are we going to make something that makes sense here, that like is intelligible or understandable, or this kind of thing? The other thing that we've got going on this week, that I think is likely to be helpful in that regard, is we've got Venus in Aquarius approaching a square with Uranus in Taurus. That's going to happen actually next Sunday. So we're sort of like moving into this square all week and getting closer and closer to that. So we can remember that Uranus in Taurus is ruled by that Venus. So anytime we see Venus making a hard aspect to Uranus in Taurus, then we're going to be like, we're sort of like just paying attention to that. There's something major that wants to take place there. We can also remember that Venus is going to be retrograde later in the year in Leo, right? And so we're going to get the same square, well, the other square, right? So this is the overcoming squares. Venus is is closing down the cycle with Uranus. Then we're going to see the conjunction of Uranus in Taurus when Venus moves into Taurus. That's in a couple of months. And then we're going to see, as we move into the summertime, then Venus is going to be on the other side in Leo, making that square to Uranus and Taurus. So this is a moment that we're likely we're gonna harken back to when we get back to when it becomes time for those Venus retrogrades, right? So Venus square Uranus, right? So Uranus in Taurus has been, I've been talking about necessity is the mother of invention for a long time, especially with that Saturn in Aquarius as well. Saturn in Aquarius, is doing all the heavy Saturn stuff, like burdensome challenges, obstacles, efficiency, management, the rules, boundaries, all that sort of stuff, right? So Venus is there with that Saturn, sort of putting this pressure onto Uranus and Taurus. So Uranus and Taurus is really good with invention, with innovation, with new ideas. I talk all the time about the mad scientist and experimentation, thinking outside the box and this sort of stuff, right? And so if we, coming back to Mars stationing direct, we've got like this moment here where it's like, all right, we've gathered all this information. We see that there are challenges and obstacles, delays, things that have stopped us from moving forward, right? So that's the necessity bit here. So then if we've got all this necessity and we've been working with all this information and sitting with all this information and like very excited to move forward on the information, but it hasn't really worked yet. And so we've been doing a lot of thinking, planning, dreaming, sleeping on it, all this kind of stuff, right? And then sort of like letting it settle in, letting it all steep. And then it's like, okay, how can we move forward? And when it comes time to move forward, we've got about 2 weeks, of this period before we really start being able to see forward motion here once Mercury starts to move forward and this, and all that, right? So once we do actually start to move forward, how can we do that? How can we do that in a way that is different from what we've been doing up to this point? How can we think outside the box on the stuff, right? We are living in a novel moment in history. Now, that's not to say that this bit of the cycle hasn't come up before, but as always, things are always a little different this time than they were last time. And I don't have to make the case that like this technology is new and all this sort of stuff, right? Like we're in a novel moment in history, and so we're going to need some new solutions to these problems, or we're going to need some new ways, like the box that we've been in up to this point. Maybe we can talk about the Earth triplicity and that's been going on for 200 years before us and whatever, right? That thing is not going to work anymore. That's not going to do it for us. And so we've been aware of this for a couple of years, right? Since 2020, the world fell apart or whatever. And we've been like sort of navigating how we're going to deal with that. Been pressure this whole time. That whole time, Saturn has been super strong, and Venus is now with that Saturn and and empowering that Saturn also. There's plenty to do as far as like getting your Saturn in order, getting into regularity or routines and habits, getting your habits together, you know, if we're thinking New Year resolutions and all this sort of stuff, right? There's Venus wants to empower that. And we can see that this Venus is in an overcoming square to Uranus. So it wants to sort of like act on that Uranus and make Uranus do whatever it is that Uranus needs to do. A good way to make sure that you have good, innovative ideas is to sit down every damn day and write some ideas out. Do it like it's a habit. Do it like a routine. Do it like it's your damn job. Thank you so much for being here. I'm out of time again. Make sure and check it out, the stuff on zambonifunk.com. I appreciate all y'all so much, so much, so much.